Pauline Nakios. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Pauline, take us back to 1998. You were working in retail and decided to create the perfect t-shirt. What was that moment like when you realized, okay, I need to do this for myself now?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, when you say 1998, it sounds like 100 years ago, and it really sometimes feels like 100 years ago. So taking you back, I grew up in a retail family. My family had a furniture business in Charleston, South Carolina for almost a century. So it was definitely in my blood. And I'd always been into fashion, since I was a young child. After college, I thought I was going to go to grad school to be an architect, and realized how many more years of school that was. And truly, it was fashion that was my passion. So after graduating in the early 90s, it was really a tough time to get a job. So naturally, my default was retail. And at that time, there was a huge trend of, these little fitted tees. We went from wearing those big oversized t-shirts in college to all of a sudden it was called the baby tee at the time. And I sold them, I wore them. And then when I moved to Atlanta, after school, after working in retail for many years, I was like, I'm going to give this a shot. I think I can do this, and I can try and do it better and have the perfect tee. And we actually had a trademarked the perfect tee way back when. But what is perfect to somebody is it's all relative, right? But when I moved to Atlanta, it was 1998 at the time, and I was like, I think that I can do this. And I had worked in the ad specialty business, so screen printing, embroidery, and so forth. And it was a company that then started their own product. So I learned a little bit about how to manufacture, which to me, truthfully, is the hardest part even today. But back then, I started with one t-shirt. It was a short sleeve crew neck t-shirt, and it came in one size. There's another brand on the market that was genius in doing this one size fits all. But truthfully, especially today, it's really not a one size fits all world. And I started with a basic tee, 5 colors, and I would pack up my little bag and I would go from boutique to boutique in Atlanta, not even realizing that stores bought in advance of the season. Mistake number one. But people were so gracious, and I learned along the way, and fast forward many, many years later, here we are.
You started with just one t-shirt?
Yes.
In 5 colors?
5 colors.
So I'd love to kind of find out about, actually, you said the manufacturing was one of the hard things, even now.
It really is.
In the early days, so, I like to focus on new brand challenges, going from the idea stage. So in your case, you wanted to take the perfect t-shirt and then start your own, going from door to door. Obviously sounds very intimidating. I kind of want to paint a picture of what it's really like to do something from scratch like that. How did you said you learned a little bit about manufacturing from your current job at the time.
Yes.
So first of all, you did go to art school in Georgia, I saw.
I did. I went to University of Georgia. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, but not apparel.
Okay, so I saw that and I was thinking, did she know how to illustrate and design, clothing herself? If somebody wants to get into this,
right,
what do they need to know? Like in terms of illustration, design, and then going to manufacturing from there, if they have like an amazing idea, like the perfect t-shirt that you had at the time.
To be honest, ignorance is bliss, right? So I really, at that age, I was, my mid-20s at that point, at that point we thought we knew everything. And truthfully, I think starting today would be very different, just simply from having the tool of the internet and being able to Google and find manufacturers in different countries. I mean, we really were limited to how we accessed information then. It's shocking to see and incredible to see how much has happened since then. But I could sketch. I did not have a technical knowledge. And really I pieced it together. So the proof is in the pudding that you really don't have to. You just have to find people that do have strengths in those areas. But I knew what I wanted. I knew what I thought made that perfect tea. And little by little, it's meeting people and asking others. And sometimes people aren't as forthright with sharing resources. Even today, it's I've worked 25 plus years on finding all of our resources in our factories, but I'm always willing to help everybody. There's always room for more people in the industry. But really knowing what works, what doesn't work, but you have to have the product, but you also have to be able to sell. So it's this fine balance of, having the financial side, having the creative side, and just simply the drive to make it work. And not everything works, and we've definitely gone through many cycles, but I think my formula for success as I look back over the years is really sticking in my lane and kind of blurring, veering off from time to time, but really staying true to who you are. And because the trends, as you know, in fashion and with everything else, they are, up and down, and you can't just pivot quickly to kind of cover that trend, or you're going to lose your base and really lose what you're about. So I've spent all these years cultivating and building what I think Lilla P really is and staying true to that. And, to capture a new audience and a different audience, you do have to kind of nod to the trends. I always say Lilla P, it's trendy without being, too trendy. So we'll nod to the trend without going too far deep into it. So as a consumer and a customer, I want to make sure that customer that fell in love with our teas will come back season after season, and they know what they're getting, they know their quality, they know the fit. And when we offer something new, it's being able to capture that interest as well.
Okay, so that's good to hear. So if, let's say our entrepreneur is a person with taste and style, and they know what they want to do, but they don't know how to draw or sketch, or they don't have arts or design education, and maybe they're intimidated because they don't have that education. But what you said now is encouraging for such a person. You just have to know what you want, maybe aligns with your vision. But then you have to find somebody. Who do you have to find? So you have to find a designer, and then obviously you have to find manufacturers, right? So like those would be the two next things to do. Is that what you did?
Yes, and for so many years we really just somehow pieced things together and made it work. We were very scrappy, and we still, I run the business very, we're tight, and we have a lot of people who are dedicated, and we have a wonderful team. Some of my employees have been with me 15 years, which is a long time. So
amazing.
You have to, find good people and allow them to grow, and then also look for expertise. For many years, our design team was really one person, eventually two, that they were able to do everything from technical, production, sourcing, and as we grew, we would, nominate what that area is that we really need help, and there's always room to do things better. Mm-hmm. But I do believe in, especially if you are self-funded, you need to be scrappy, and you need to find people who are willing, to roll their sleeves up. Mm-hmm. And in today's world of freelance, there's wonderful opportunities to make it work financially for you, because you can't spend until you're generating. It's a very fine dance, and a lot of times creative businesses don't often have that yin yang. And I'm fortunate to have my husband as my business partner, he's a finance guy. I always tell him he's the smartest guy in the room. I don't know if I should tell him that too often, but it's sort of true. But he's able to balance, that right side of the brain and left side of the brain, because it's not often that one person has all of that. So you have to lean in, listen, and be open to ideas. But I think there's so many ways, to find success in staying in that lane to create a product that you're proud of.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of self-funded, did you fund yourself in the early days, or did you raise investment?
We did. I completely self-funded. Now, I will tell you, this is, before we started, I said to you that I'm not afraid to give, and I wish someone had given me, expertise and advice at a young age, or I wish I was open to it more so, because I'm not afraid to let people know where my missteps were. And I'll never forget when I first moved to New York. Thomas and I were not married yet, and he looked at me, and he was in real estate finance at the time, and he said, "Okay, I'm ready to help you with your business, but you're gonna have to this is time. You're gonna have to kill it. Let's start with your business plan." And we laugh about it today. I don't know if it's real giggles or fearful giggles, but he said, he turned white as a ghost. My eyes got this big. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no business plan. Zero. None. And so that was a sheer moment of panic. And, but we made it work. But at that time, I had a small amount of money. I had $10,000. And I was like, all right, I'm going to invest this and however long, let's see how long it lasts. And, by year, and that was 98. So I moved here to New York in 01. And by 04, we had a thriving, it was a real business with a couple of employees, sales reps, etc. And by then I did have to go and we took out a line of credit with the bank. And at that time, it was very easy. They were giving away money. But I feel very fortunate that I have not had to raise. So we're completely self-reliant there.
$10,000. What can $10,000 buy you now if you wanted to start something? Can you actually start a brand with $10,000 to test something at least?
I mean, it's so different today. I think it really would depend on what is it a product? If it's a single product, possibly. But it's not going to last very long.
Mm-hmm. But is it enough to test to see if there's demand? Because one thing I learned when I started talking to e-commerce founders is this concept of minimum orders. What are the minimums like in your world? What do they agree to, saying, okay, that's at least minimum 10,000 things or 20,000 units you have to order and it will cost $25,000? Or entrepreneurs tell me they kind of put in their life savings into those minimum order quantities.
Right.
So that seems like a thing people really need to know before jumping in.
Yes. Well, that's the thing, is if you're going to produce overseas, the minimums are higher. That's just what it is. Even for a company our size, there are certain countries that have, minimums that we could not even come close to. And we do have a huge assortment of SKUs every season. So, we're not producing 5 styles that we replenish. It's 40 styles a month, 10 months of the 12 a year. And that's in various colors and so forth. You're going to pay, there are smaller factories if you want to do domestic, which I wish we could do more of, but it's very expensive, but you'll probably find domestic factories willing to do smaller runs, but you're going to pay for it. So you're not going to get a lot for it. Your pricing structure is going to have to be such that it's higher. And if you wanting to wholesale, which when I started my business, there was no direct to consumer, there was no e-commerce. So we are built on we're 75% of my business is wholesale. So, there's, in a wholesale scenario, there's a middleman. So we're selling to the boutiques who are then turning around and selling it to that end user. So we could really never afford, we have to be so careful on pricing. But at the same time, not being, in over our head with inventory. Now, again, with inventory, we are placing right now, for example, we had a meeting this morning and we're putting our cut tickets, which is our orders, in for next summer, our commitments, which is delivering to my customer April and May. So we have already done our development, we have done our fitting, we have done our photo shoot, our wholesale team and our sales reps have gone out and sold this product to the stores that will be bringing it in April and May. So because I'm wholesale driven, I have sales against those cut tickets. I really have no idea how companies that are only direct to consumer hit these high minimums and hope that they sell it. So the wholesale model gives us that gauge of, hey, people are responding to this product, so we're able to project into at that point. So I think it's a lot, wholesale gives you good data.
Oh, interesting. So were you wholesale since day one?
Yes.
Mostly?
Yes, that's all there was.
Yeah.
Other than my mother, who would literally, in the back of her car, sell them. She was the creepy woman at the grocery store in her cute Southern accent. They would, get women in the grocery store to come out to her car and buy T-shirts. It was that is literally how it was.
That's amazing.
It was my best sales rep.
So going back to those days where you were going boutique to boutique, and then they were telling you, well, we do this way in advance, and you learned that. So how did you sell your first 100 units then after hearing that from them?
Oh, yes. Well, my first delivery, let's see, that was 98. It was, as I mentioned, one style, a little short sleeve crew neck t-shirt, which we actually still have that style on the line. It has changed a bit since then. We're now 5 sizes. But at that time, speaking of minimums, I had to literally meet the minimums required by the factory, which at the time was domestic. I don't remember how many I had. I can just visualize my house in Atlanta in the garage, floor to ceiling boxes of goods that I had never sold. So I really was projecting out on nothing. And that's when I said I literally would pack up my duffel bag and go from boutique to boutique. And then as I learned, and this is where I wish I had, being raised as a Southern, I bring this up often, being raised in Charleston as a Southern woman. I think people are raised differently now, but we were taught, don't bother people, don't be in people's way. And now it's amazing when I have young interns come in, no matter where they're from, they're pushing, they're asking. So there's been a huge shift in, really raising future entrepreneurs and future young people today, which I admire. But I was not that girl. So I did not know. There are things that I learned on the fly, like, hey, boutiques go to market, go to the trade shows, go to, see sales reps. They're buying months in advance of a delivery. And I had that aha moment, okay. And little by little, what took me probably 5 years, if I had just had someone to mentor me, or if I had the guts to really ask someone more questions, it would probably save me a good 5 years of learning. But obviously those 5 years paid off. So.
Pauline, would it be realistic for someone to, let's say, come up with 2-3 designs looking cool, maybe some samples, and walk into a boutique in Brooklyn or Manhattan or wherever and just show them? Let's say they're impressed. Oh, this is really cool, actually. And then go back and order some minimum, saying that, look, I have interest from these boutiques. Is that a realistic way to think about it, or no?
It is. This is the first, with any products, your prototypes, or what we call sales samples. That is, they'll do onesie, twosie, and you often will pay 1.5 to 2 times the cost to produce these samples, which is it's certainly worth it rather than investing in inventory off the bat. Now, getting that appointment is the hard part. But
how do you get it? Do you need warm intros, or can you just walk in and be a pest, which you don't want to be?
I think they both work. Not every no is closer to a yes, right? So the more doors you knock on, you might get people, whether the owner's not in, they're not interested. Sometimes it is the owner and they say, oh, the owner's not here, because they see someone walking in wanting to sell them something. Listen, at the end of the day, networking is so important. My first couple of stores were stores that I had a friend that worked there. I had a cousin that was a buyer. It definitely helps. It doesn't make a sale, but it definitely helps to get the foot in the door. But in today's world, there's so many more ways, whether it's social media, creating, whether if you want to go the influencer route. But sometimes I think the best is good old-fashioned cold calling. Even if you're not going in to sell, you go in and introduce yourself, you leave some information, you leave a couple of, great little postcard that makes you look bigger than you are because you have some gorgeous image on it with your product. And, there will be things that hit, and, that's the start of it. So you can go door to door. And then a big pivotal part was when I had my first sales rep. So a sales rep is an independent sales representative that oftentimes has many brands. Sometimes they have a showroom in Atlanta, LA, Dallas, Chicago. And we happen to be the way that my business, and again, because I started so long ago, my business works into carving out the United States into lots of little small territories. So some people have one sales rep for the East Coast and one for the West that handle the whole territory. We are old-fashioned the way that I believe it's boots on the ground. It's relationship-driven. So, in the day, I would go from Dallas to Atlanta to Chicago, and I had sales reps, but I would be there because at the end of the day, the customer, I wanted them to have a face behind the brand. And I think that's also what's so important today. People do want a story. They want to know there's somebody behind the brand, and what does that brand stand for? And that's cyclical too, because there are many brands that you're like, who is this person behind this brand? But I think today's world, people want a story, and there's so many wonderful ways to tell that story now with social media and anything, all these digital forms of marketing that I did not have at this part.
You mentioned another scary word, cold calling. So this is another thing I think people probably don't really anticipate. It's a hard thing to do. But now I must ask you because a couple of weeks ago I talked to the co-founder of Fortunato Chocolate, where they found this like extinct cacao in Peru, and he was cold calling the pastry chefs at restaurants.
Wow.
As if, and then just you said the owner may not be in or something like that. The person who works there picks up the phone. Oh, are they expecting your call? Like, how do you introduce yourself? What's your first line of pitch? Because you probably somebody else picks up the phone, so you need to talk to the owner. So I know it's like a nitty-gritty, but it feels like that might be, if you unlock like one good pitch,
Yeah.
it might unlock a lot of doors. It feels like.
Well, it really is, and we'll oftentimes, even in our corporate office, we have a sales team in our corporate office, and then they manage our external independent sales reps, and we'll often share, hey, say someone was able to get through to a store we've been trying to sell for so long. Well, what worked? What was your response? And just sharing and hearing, and that's why being in an office environment. Post-COVID, it was really hard. I mean, we're 3 days a week in the office and 2 days a week remote, just because it's a nice balance for everybody. But those days that we're in together, you're learning so much by being around other people. And I think the most important, everybody has their own selling style. And I'm not going to lie, because how many years later, 26 years later, my heart beats when I pick up, when I start.
It's such a nerve-wracking thing to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger.
No,
what if they're rude?
That's the thing. I mean, oftentimes they are, right? But if I were selling your product, I'd have no problem. But when it's your own, it's personal. But I think that's the pivoting point, is you have to take the personal side. If someone hangs up on you, if someone says no, it is not personal. It's not personal. So you have to take that emotion out of it. And as I said, every no is closer to a yes. And I also think being very genuine and relatable. And, I always, even when we had a retail store prior to COVID, but one of my biggest pet peeves is that very cut and dry and rehearsed. When you walk into a store and they're like, let me know if I can help you with anything. Those are my least favorite things. I even at a retail standpoint, when we had the store, I said to the girls, please say anything but that. Talk about something else, because it's just so off-putting, because how many other people are calling? Hi, my name is so-and-so and I'm calling from. You want to break that mold. You have, what do they say? You have like 5 seconds to kind of catch someone in today's world. So you've got to figure out what that hook is. Mm-hmm. And do your research. Know something about the store you're calling.
Pauline, how did you go from one t-shirt, 5 colors, to an actual collection? When did you feel like Lilla P was going to actually break through? Like, how long did it take for you to have that feeling in your stomach where, okay, this is really going to take off and now we can grow?
I would describe myself as the marathon runner, and then my husband's the sprinter. So again, it's that balance, because I thrive on comfort. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to grow. In order to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. But I probably would have stayed doing what I was doing because it was working. I even had a side hustle of making jewelry. But it was a total diversion what I was supposed to be doing. I would show up at Atlanta Market with my stand of all these handmade gorgeous necklaces, and that's what people were buying. I'm like, this is a problem. I'm here to sell my line, but I'm selling the jewelry. So I think the pivotal point for me was once the product started to work in the stores, and I maybe got some reorders or so forth. I can't remember who the store was, but they said, Pauline, we really like you, but we need you to offer more. And I was like, okay, I heard you loud and clear.
That's such a nice thing to hear.
It was, and everybody really, I really had and still do have a great, lovely group of customers that have grown with me. And I think that's part of the success too, is having that relatability. Going back to the cold calling question, one of the things I was going to say there is I think about the customers we're closest to. It's the ones I pick up the phone and have a conversation. It's not one that I'm texting or hiding behind email. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you could do as a new brand, is set yourself apart, because you see how many emails you get a day. It used to be we felt compelled to answer emails. You don't feel compelled to even read an email anymore. It used to be you felt compelled to read a text or respond to a text. You don't need to anymore. I mean, you have to really think outside the box and find that whenever I'm in a town or even if we're on vacation, I'm like, let me run into that store. We sell them. I'm going to go see if they're there. That solidifies that relationship. I have made the effort. I've seen the store. I can now help the buyers buy Lilla P better because I've seen the customer. I've seen the store. And it's old school, but it's really important.
Mm-hmm. And when did you decide to give a little bit more priority to direct-to-consumer in addition to wholesale?
We starting in 1998, there was not even I didn't even know how to use the internet. I mean, I remember understanding the difference between www and Pauline at lillap.com. I was like, if that's how old I am. But we had our first website. Now, granted, at the time, you literally could just put something up and it was a website. But very early on, and we had started, for a smaller company, from a technical side. Again, my husband is very technical, so he always believed in building, having systems that are bigger than you need and you grow into them. So I recently was, not that I'm a PR person for NetSuite, but last year I went to a dinner and it was a NetSuite hosted dinner. And we were talking, it was probably a group of 15 or so people. I mean, everybody was going around the room saying how long they'd been on NetSuite. And we were 2005. And I looked at the guy that worked for NetSuite. I go, were you born in 2005? He said, no. But again, from NetSuite was our original website was actually tied through NetSuite at the time. So we had that presence early on, even though my company, it was not the biggest shift from really focusing big time on direct to consumer, because there has to be a balance, and it also helps with those cut tickets I was talking about, and for branding, you have to kind of follow the tide as it goes. And, if we did not put this effort into that branding of who Lilla P is and who we want that audience to see us as, and building out that e-commerce, but at the same time, the tricky part is balancing, because my allegiance really is I built the company on my wholesalers, and that's where that relationship is. And as I mentioned, we're 75% wholesale and 25% direct to consumer, give or take. And a lot of new businesses are probably the flip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but I think, during COVID, we had no choice. That's all we really could do. We supported our wholesalers that could stay open or had other ways, if they had a website already up and running, we were able to help support them with product that they could sell. And we were very fortunate that our type of product, which is comfortable and casual and everyday, was what people were buying if they were buying clothing. I will always say I'm just so glad we weren't like evening gowns, because no one was buying evening gowns back then. But we took that, that opportunity. We saw a big growth in our direct-to-consumer at the time, and we've been able to maintain that growth, but also build back the wholesale business, because the wholesale business is the pillar of my business. Mm-hmm. It is what enables me to run. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. When I talk to founders, a lot of priorities that I hear is they're trying to get into retail or more retail as next year's priorities, mm-hmm. where they had started as DTC, as you said. In your case, it's the other way around. And also, back in 1998, when you started, I think we may be in the same generation. When you were starting your brand, I was starting my first software engineering job working on Y2K bugs.
Oh my God!
Which nothing happened. We kind of worked on this thing for 2 years, and then 2000 came, and we were expecting to see something is going to crash and burn, and nothing happened.
I know. Isn't it amazing to think about?
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, going back to that. I understand why new brands are focused on direct to consumer. The profitability, it's so much more profitable. But again, as I mentioned, with minimum requirements on orders, the wholesale is what drives the volume of the business. It's not as high of a profit margin, obviously, but I think it's coming up with that balance that's right for your business.
Yeah, and also, probably a lot of our listeners aren't even that old to kind of remember those days, but there was a dot-com crash at the time when even if you could have started your own e-commerce business, maybe it was not a good time. And then in 2008, again, there was another financial crash, which, just very rocky times. So let's talk about marketing a little bit, old school marketing and new school marketing. Obviously, in the early days, you were mostly marketing to wholesale, like retail. But then let's talk about consumer marketing. How do you directly market to consumers? How were you in the early days, and how are you doing it now? What works? What doesn't work? What do you think that was working is going to stop working next year? And what do you think is going to be hot again, like in terms of a marketing
my
trend?
crystal ball out. Oh, I wish I had one. But as I mentioned, early on, there was no marketing strategy. It was a one-person team, me. And at the time, it was solely focused on getting the product into stores. So there, I remember the first real investment I made was our photo shoots. Because we wanted to have the brand assets to then create a lookbook, postcards. At that time, there was no email campaigns. It's simply old school mailing, and that was a real investment of thinking of who do you want this brand to be? Who are you gearing towards? And even today, we are across the board, which does make targeting and figuring out that market a little bit challenging, because I have stores and customers that have been buying my product for 20 years and some that have been buying it for 2 years. And they're across the board. But Lilla P really is a chameleon, and I feel very fortunate in that way, because we could sell to a more classic store, and we can sell to a super contemporary store. And I'm going to pull the line differently, and it's really how you style it. But it's hard, sometimes hard to walk that middle line, because I think if you have a specific brand that you look at a brand and you know who that customer is, but I just don't want to pigeonhole myself into that. I think it limits you who your market is. And again, if I were starting today, we would probably start with a marketing strategy and campaign and build the brand around it in tandem. And mine was sort of a game of catch up over the years. And I remember when we were working with a PR company that really pushed me to think about those brand pillars and who is Lilla P, who do you want her to be, the storytelling. And then came social media, and that's a whole nother element. Influencers, that was a huge thing. And it's important to us. It does not drive volume of sales, but it's more for assets and building brand recognition. Now, some companies are solely built. I think of some of these amazing beauty brands, it's all influencer based, but that just was not our model. And if you know that's your model, you lean into that and you go there. But it is incredible how quickly the digital landscape changes. Mm-hmm. And, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. Constantly reading about other brands' stories and listening to interesting podcasts such as yours, where you start to learn and take little fragments and little bits from other people. And that's why I love networking so much and learning about other people's businesses, because you never know what might work. It is going to be interesting to see what's next, because I think there is some type of exhaustion. I think, today is Cyber Monday. I look at my inbox. Oh my gosh. It's jam-packed. So where, what rises to the top? How noisy do you have to be? What noise captures someone's attention? And I will always step back and take it up as a consumer myself. And I can't tell you the amount of product I buy in the middle of the night on Instagram. I don't even know what it is. But I always find I would describe myself as a marketer's dream. But what is working and what is working for me, and trying to take that, apply it to my business, because I think at the end of the day, who my core customer is, it's hopefully someone like me plus or minus 10, 15 years. So we've got a wide base. And even with that wide base, you have to market differently to one generation than the other.
Yeah.
It is a very noisy landscape.
It's really noisy, and I try to think about it and see how it's going to be in a few years from now, because some of the people I follow, other brand builders, or just the advice is start the sales earlier, send more emails. Started 5 days earlier, actually started 10 days earlier. So what happens? It's so interesting. Is it sustainable?
I know, and it's getting more, the digital marketing, it's more and more expensive to acquire a customer. It's more expensive to maintain that customer. And I feel very fortunate again, that we have such a solid, loyal base that we're not constantly trying to reinvent ourselves. I mean, we need, it's so important to constantly be finding new customers and a new audience, but maintaining, to me, is really key. It's really key.
Pauline, for the creator influencers who are listening and watching, what do you look for when you're collabing with creators that would be a good match for your brand?
I think it has to be someone who understands our brand ethos, right? We are simple yet anything but basic. We are classic with a twist. It has to be someone that's not, if someone is more drawn to embellishment and sparkles, they're not going to resonate with my brand. So, back in the day, any influencer that would work with us, we would give it a shot, and it just wasn't on brand. So I think, when I am looking and follow, certain influencers or stylists that I follow, I have to be open because you never know, right? You have to try things. But I resonate with a clean aesthetic, someone who shops with purpose, that's maybe buying less but better, because we're not the least expensive in our category. We're not the most expensive. But yes, you could buy t-shirts for $20. You can buy t-shirts for $120, but making sure that you're marketing to the right audience that understands the product and understands the brand.
I have a question for you. I almost don't want to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. And the reason I don't want to ask is because I know what your answer is going to be, knowing that you've been running your brand for 28 years. And when I ask that question to entrepreneurs like you in the past who've been running their business, I always hear the same thing. So the question is this. So please try.
Okay.
If you wanted to start a new brand from scratch, which can be any category, the question is going to be, what would it be? And my expected answer from you would be, I would do the same exact thing because it seems like you're in love with what you're doing, so you've been doing it for so long. But try and see if you can come up with a different answer.
Okay, in the height of a season, or if we've had some kind of an issue with production or a season or a delivery, I'm like, why am I doing something that has seasons and sizes? So the short answer, I love fragrance, right? I love I love scent. I love the way it makes you feel and the sensory side of it. And there's so many times, and maybe Lilla P will do a scent at some point that resonates and goes along with the brand. Curious to know what that would be. But there's no season and there's no size. Oh, what a dream that would be.
Scents, interesting. But let's talk about seasons, because now you got me curious about something. Sizes I understand, because some of the brands that we work with, anybody who doesn't have a size, it's much easier to kind of ship gifts to creators and things like that. When there's a size involved, you have to ask their size. Oh, so that's like a whole thing. But seasons, I'd imagine, would have been an interesting thing, just based on a book that I'd read a long time ago, which kind of stuck with me. There's a marketing professor at Wharton School of Business. His name is Jonah Berger, and anybody who's listening and watching, highly recommend a book called Contagious. Okay. For anybody who wants to start a business in anything that you want the word to spread. So Contagious is about that. So some of the elements of like what gets people talking, what leads to word of mouth.
I know what I'm going to order tonight.
Please do. I think you'll like it. One of the elements in the book is triggers. So, he gives an example of the song called Friday. So like that got popular. I don't know the singer's name, but at one point every Friday, if you go to YouTube, that song, people are just listening to the song. So it kind of triggers something in their heads. So even in my previous business, we were doing something, every day at 11 a.m. something happens. That's so fun. That always made me think that, wouldn't it be cool to have something new happen 4 times a year, every season, just to give something fresh? So like on, January 1st and March 1st. But now what you just told me, it sounds like it's a little bit of a headache. So I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, I think, listen, it keeps the designs fresh. It keeps us constantly looking ahead and producing new for the next year. I mean, we're about to start working on spring 26. But in the apparel industry, you have deliveries monthly. And as I mentioned before, we don't deliver in June, we don't deliver in December. Classically, traditionally those are your sale months, so people aren't as apt to bring in new product. So we give the stores a little break by then. So we deliver 10 times a year. There's a very short window where that is aged product, right? So it has to turn fairly quickly. And there's so much product constantly coming to the market. And then also, don't forget, I'm bringing in, I'm not what we call cut to order all the time. We're cutting smarter, but cut to order means I have sold 12, I am making 12. We might have sold 12, but I'm making 20. I have to have for immediate business, for reorders, etc. But with seasons, and with not even within a season, so our spring season is January, February, and March deliveries. So once that January 30th is done and February 1st comes, that January product, we might still get some reorders if it's been a strong style, but they've moved on. It's constantly looking ahead. Now, there are some styles that we have that are evergreen, so they're always on the line, but it's a very small portion of the line, of the collection. And even in that case, it's new colors.
I understand now. I was thinking about it with a marketer's hat, thinking that it's just a fresh new way to send an email with something new that's different. But what I forgot about was to put on my operator's hat that now you have 3 months to sell it.
Yeah, if that really, because once I think about the retailer, we're shipping in spring and January, and think where you are in Rhode Island, spring product on the floor of a store in January. Are people really buying? They used to buy so much ahead of the season, and there are still people who do, and good retailers get their customers to really buy, because if you don't buy it now, you're not going to see it later, you're not going to have your size later. But it's you're not wearing that product till April? Mm-hmm. And then February product rolls in, and you're still trying to move whatever you didn't move from your January. So it's a good brand and good salespeople will really, again, going into the store, and this is why I believe in having sales representatives that represent my brand, going into the stores. They know they know the team, they know the store, they know the customer. They're helping that store buy the best they can possibly buy. Mm-hmm. For them. Right. What they're buying in Florida is very different than what they're buying in Seattle.
So fragrance, no seasons, no sizes.
Stay tuned.
Curious, is AI being helpful to you in coming up with new collections?
I am a creature of habit. Thomas, my husband, is constantly saying, Pauline, you need to get on this AI, you're going to be a dinosaur. And where I have to say he was right again is I still do write the copy for the descriptions because it is so natural for me. I write them like I sell them. And I'm like, how could AI possibly help? He's like, Pauline, you train it. So we have spent the last month, he's helped me really, he's a magician with it, it's amazing, but he's really not afraid. He leans into it where I'm like, oh, I don't know, I can do it better. And he was right, and I'm training it. I'm training it with my voice, I'm training it with the information that's important, and it hasn't helped. I haven't gone there from a design standpoint yet, but so far it's really been helpful in creating even just simply writing the copy for me that's on brand. And when it's not, you tell it. So I can only imagine when I dip my toes into a more creative side of AI, what's going to be. But I still always want to have that personal touch on it because I think at some point, I would not want it to feel like a machine.
Final two-part question. Top 2 problems giving you a headache right now, and top 2 priorities that you have excited for the year and the next year, including an upcoming collection in the spring.
Having teenagers, no, I'm kidding. I know that's not what you meant. I will say top of mind is the tariff situation. It's going to be real.
Oh, okay.
It's real. And there's a lot of unknown right now. And, for example, we are trying to price the new fall collection that we'll start selling in January. We'll start shipping it in July. And it's really hard to know there's some speculation of what that tariff is going to be. And we produce in India, China, Peru. Some we have done some Turkish production as well. But it's just a lot of unknown, and it can be very volatile. And if you don't step into this in a very smart way, it can easily put someone out of business, I'm afraid. So we're still trying to figure out what that means. And with that also ties to what we nodded to earlier is the sales part and the marketing part is a lot more my alley. That is my lane. The production, the sourcing, especially with people scrambling to perhaps move production to countries where the impact of the tariffs won't be as significant. That's the tricky. So it's all tied into sourcing and production. And listen, I wish I could make sweaters here in the United States. There's only a couple of factories that do it, but it's just doesn't align with the product or the price point. So we'll see what happens. But that's definitely top of mind there. Those are the two trickiest things right now.
And what should we expect for the new collection in the spring? What's exciting?
Yes, well, the spring collection we'll be shipping it to stores in January. It was very well received. I think just when we think we've had a great season, I really love when my customers, who are the retailers, the stores, they're like, Pauline, this is the best we've ever seen it, and that really fuels me. We treat it as I started as t-shirts, it really was t-shirt, and we had a few sweaters. It's now really a collection that is very still top driven. I mean, I'm sure if you looked in your wife's closet, there's more tops and bottoms. We all live in our jeans and so forth, and lots of tops to go with, but we're really approaching Lilla P as a full collection. And I'm such a practical shopper and dresser myself that I want that end user to be able to maybe take 3 or 4 pieces and wear them together and get tons of use out of them. So it's really intentional wardrobing. So I'm excited for everybody to see the line. There's some really special pieces. And it's things you'll wear season after season. It's not a one and done.
Pauline Nakios, thank you so much for sharing your journey with me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I can't wait to read that book.